elasticity or resilience, because there's something inside that's very simple, and it holds you in a fixed place, even when there's something that comes along that stretches in a different way. And when something comes along that stretches in a different way, there's some austerity. But I'll tell a little Prabhupada story. A little Prabhupada story was one time in Vrindavan. Some of you have been to Vrindavan, and those of you that haven't been to Vrindavan, Deer specifically, was the devotees were wondering, why is he getting the property out here? It's in the middle of nowhere. It's just agriculture field, left, right, and sideways, and backwards and forwards. It's just in the middle of nowhere. And today, when you go to Vrindavan, Krishna Balaram here, it's like crazy. There's shops all over the place, and horns all over the place, and trucks, and rickshaws, and it's really congested and dirty. But when the temple was first built, you walk across, you go out the front gate, and there's this agricultural field. So we went, the Prabhupada's procedure was, at 6 o'clock, very punctual, he would leave his quarters, walk from his quarters alongside the temple, go out the front gate and turn right through the front gate. So we went out one morning and went out to the right, and somehow I got to go on most of those morning walks. So we went quite some distance, and this particular morning was a little further walk than we usually went, and down the distance on the right-hand side was a grove of trees. So Prabhupada looked at us, looked at the grove of trees, and charged off for the grove of trees, off the main road into the grove of trees. And that particular morning, he was always in the mood of teaching us lessons. And one of the lessons that morning was austerity, and then another lesson was simplicity. No, those two words. So when we were going into the forested area, Prabhupada was appreciating the life of simplicity. How wonderful it is in Vrindavan. With just whatever is supplied by nature, one can live very simply and have the rest of the day for cultivating spiritual life. And he noticed on one of the trees, there were some pods, looked like bean pods growing. And he reached over, grabbed one of them, and asked somebody, is this edible? We're just talking about how you can get things that nature supplies. There's roots and there's edibles. And we kept walking, and there was a bit of a cliff, a sharp decline. And then over in the distance, he pointed with his cane. See over there? There's this little cottage. They have a cow. So if you're a sadhu, when you go in the morning at milking time, you have a little cup. So they'll give you some milk. The milk, these little pods, little roots, and your economic needs for the day are solved. And the rest of the day you have for serving Krishna. He was in the mood of simplicity. The life of Vrindavan. It was really like, the mood was very strong. And then I took it as it was deliberate. He turned right in the middle of this, the life of simplicity, and said to Brahmananda, did you receive the $50,000? And did you put it in the account for the book publication? Did you check the color separations? You know, a few minutes of that kind of talk, and then complete U-turn. It was life and simplicity in Vrindavan. So I took it, he didn't say it explicitly, but I took it that he was teaching us to aspire for, be happy with the life of simplicity. And when it comes to things that are more complicated, you deal with it because it's for service to Krishna, but the heart's attraction is for a life of simplicity. And then along the way, Yashodanandana Swami was with us, and he started, limping. So Prabhupada stopped and turned to him and said, what happened? He said, Prabhupada, I stepped on a thorn. He said, why didn't you bring your shoes? Next time, bring your shoes. Yes, Prabhupada. So it was just practical exchanges that were teaching us, there's austerity has its, wear shoes when you're walking through the forest that has thorns. Although you don't just walk through a forest that has thorns because you like austerity and the pain of thorns in your foot. So we take practical arrangements. Within that practical arrangement, there's some principles of austerity. I mentioned yesterday that on May 3rd, coming up soon, it's Akshaya Tritiya, which means 2 days before that, it's Ekadasi, right? So Saturday is Ekadasi. So look forward to the simplicity and austerity of the auspicious day of Ekadasi, where you accept voluntarily some little, whatever it is, austerity that is super suitable for your lifestyle and your capacity. And you do make that as an offering to Krishna while increasing your hearing and chanting. And that's our life. When you live your life that way, you have resiliency. You have resiliency because then you have a spiritual connection. That's the foundation for our resiliency, our simplicity, and voluntary austerity. Now, something more on the topic of resiliency. Here's 2 Sanskrit words, Trishti and Drishti. Trishti and Drishti. The 2 words, they sound alike, but they have different meanings. Trishti means circumstances that life presents before us. I mean, one way to take what Trish, just like it's one of the Shristi, Sati, Pralaya, Sadhana, Shakti, Rekha, the verse, Chayeva Yashu Bhavanani Bharti Durga. Yeah, so Srishti can mean creation, but circumstance, it can also mean circumstances that life presents before us. That's Srishti. And then Drishti is how you perceive those circumstances. And a phrase that Prabhupada would sometimes use, more than sometimes, reality distinguished from illusion. You've heard that phrase? Those who've heard Prabhupada's writing or speaking, reality distinguished from illusion. So an example that is reality distinguished from illusion is being able to see a rope as a rope, and rather than perceiving the rope to be a snake. Perceiving a rope to be a snake is maybe drishti, but it's not what the rope is. Rope is a rope and a snake is a snake. So here's a rope that looks like a snake. Look, it's even moving. But when you recognize that it's a rope, it's not a snake, then fear may be taken from you because it's rope, it's not a snake. So that's drishti, and an example of shrishti and drishti. Perceiving a rope to be a snake is a drishti example. Here's another very nice example I like. This is something that when I speak at stress management seminars, this is a good one. So you can find it online. It's called The Chinese Farmer Story. There's also a India farmer story too. It's very similar. So the story goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer. And the Chinese farmer had the village people in his village visit him and said, "Oh, what good fortune, you have a horse. Because you have a horse, you can plow your fields much more easily than those of us that don't have a horse. What good fortune." And the Chinese farmer was a Taoist. He said, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" Some time passed, the horse ran away. And the village people came to the farmer and said, "Oh, what misfortune, the horse ran away, now you have to plow your fields like us." And the Chinese farmer said, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" After some time, the horse came back. And not only the horse came back with several other horses, wild horses. And the villagers went to the farmer and said, "Oh, what good fortune. Now you have several horses, and now you can plow your fields even more easily than the rest of us. What good fortune." And the farmer said, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" Some time passed. His son was trying to train the wild horses how to plow the fields, and he fell off the horse and broke his leg. So the villagers came to the farmer and said, "Oh, what ill fortune. Your son fell off the horse. Now he has a broken leg." The farmer said, as usual, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" Some time passed, the Chinese government went to war. They passed a law that said all able-bodied men between this age and that age had to join the army. And when they came to the village, because his son had a broken leg, he didn't have to go to war. So the villagers came to the farmer and said, "Oh, what good fortune, your son had a broken leg, you didn't have to go to war like the rest of us, and then you go to war." And the farmer said, "Good fortune, ill fortune, who can say?" That's the end of the story. Probably there's more, but that's the end of the story. So there's the Shrishti and there's the Drishti. And sometimes they don't match. And so reality distinguished from illusion has a big part to do with resiliency. This Chinese farmer was very resilient. So for a different reason than a Hare Krishna devotee, he wouldn't say, Krishna's mercy, Krishna's mercy. He was like shrugging his shoulders, not placing a particular value in the circumstance as opposed to another circumstance. So for the resiliency for the devotee is shelter in Krishna. And one can serve Krishna in any circumstance. One can serve Krishna in any circumstance. Here's an example. Some of you may know this person. I mention him regularly because he's a good source of reference. Viktor Frankl. There's a photograph of him. He wrote a book in 1946, which was right after World War II, when he was released from a Nazi concentration camp. He was a Jewish man who had survived a Nazi concentration camp. And at the end, he wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning. And that book has been reprinted something like 19 times because it's very popular. And it's also very skinny. It's easy to read, and it has lots of wisdom in it. And it has to do with his resiliency message. That's why I selected it. Here's one of those sayings that comes directly from Google. Everything from his book. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing. The last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So he got strength. His resiliency was in the strength of that freedom that couldn't be taken from him by the circumstance. And in his case, the choice that he was making was, by profession, he was a psychiatrist, and he wanted to be able to help people after the war was over to be able to deal with their negative emotions that were arising from circumstances outside of their control. Now, most likely, we'll not have to endure what he had to endure. His tribulation is far greater than anything that we'll probably ever know. I mean, most likely. But he sustained his freedom of choice because he had a mission. He saw it as his mission in life was to help people who were in, circumstances they couldn't control, but to maintain their, we'll use this word, resiliency, their strength, their inner strength. Here's another taken directly from the book. There is also purpose in life, which is almost barren of both creation and enjoyment, and which admits of but one possibility of high moral behavior, namely, a man's attitude to existence, an existence restricted by external forces. These two same quotes were made on Thursday evening, but I like them because it's right on topic. The attitude of a man, or each one of us, men or ladies, our attitude towards our existence, which in fact is restricted by external forces, minimally birth, death, disease, and old age, and so many other external forces. We're restricted. We don't have unlimited freedom. It's foolish to think we have unlimited freedom. We're restricted. So still, there's a purpose that our life may have, and if you can be inquisitive to know what's your purpose in life, you know that you can fill in the blank with different things. But when there is a clear, and progressively as you become more mature in life, a more clear and more refined sense of your mission in life, then there's a lot of strength there. That's where resiliency rests upon, because that mission in life isn't going to be taken from you. Life may be taken from you, but it may continue even in your next life, or your eternal life, if that mission is very clear. A lot of strength. Barren of both creation and enjoyment, which admits but one possibility of high moral behavior, your attitude to your existence, your purpose of life. There's a few more quotes. Physical strength is measured by what we carry. Inner strength is measured by what we can bear. This is the resiliency message expressed in different words. Same understanding is there in Bhagavad Gita. Of course, the words are different, but the Brahmabhuta verse expresses it. This Brahmabhuta, in simple language, is to know who you are. Maybe some of you saw, I'm sure most of you, not all of you, saw this wonderful video that Vishaka and Yadavar put together in honor of Srila Prabhupada. And one of my favorite sections was a video clip where Prabhupada is being interviewed, looks like by a television, TV talk show kind of guy. And he's sitting at a big desk, and there's a kind of a blank backdrop behind him. And the man says something like this: Swamiji, you came to America, you obviously had some message. Could you share with us what that message is that you wanted to deliver when you visited America? And Prabhupada's answer was so short. He said, to know yourself. The man was like, to know yourself. And Prabhupada looked at him and said, to know yourself. That's always the video clip. I'm sure there was more dialogue after that. But to know yourself is a big deal. When you can unpack it, it becomes many, 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 many things. But put it all together, and it's, in a sutra, it's to know yourself. That's Brahmabhuta. And one who knows who they are, it means to know who you are in the context of the big picture of things, and to know the big picture of things, what's the source of the big picture of things, what's the lines or connections between all things and the source of all things, including ourselves, and how we fit into that. That's part of Brahmabhuta. And with Brahmabhuta, then comes Prasanatma, happiness within. And then, when there's that happiness within, resiliency. Na sochati, na kangsati, samak sarveshu bhuteshu. And then the nice translation. And then devotional service begins. And I remember reading that thinking, wait a minute, what am I doing now? Because I don't have that prasanatma, na sochati, na kangsati. So what am I doing? But the answer is pure devotional service. Pure devotional service, unmixed devotional service. Vad bhaktim labhate param. That's this resiliency message when it's really matured. So there's preliminary, and then there's matured, and there's in between. So So to get there, we need strength. And to get that strength, we need strength beyond our own strength. So this is a nice little image showing strength beyond our own strength. Remember hearing Prabhupada telling a little story of a young boy walking along the street holding his father's hand. And here comes a big dog, woof woof, showing his teeth, growling. And little boy is undisturbed because he knows he's holding his father's hand. My father has always protected me. I have nothing to worry. Because there's strength beyond his own strength. And when we have strength beyond our own strength, there's resiliency. And that strength beyond your own strength is not muscle power, but spiritual strength. Here's a nice quote I like from Krishna book, chapter 2. Chapter 2 is the prayers of the demigods to Krishna within the womb. Prabhupada writes, one cannot attain the supreme platform of self-realization, this Brahmabhuta, without being sufficiently favored by Balaram. Bala does not mean physical strength. No one can attain spiritual perfection by physical strength. One must have the spiritual strength which is infused by Balaram or Sankarshana. There you have resiliency, even when faced with adversity, because what's life? Is there such a thing? The answer is no. Is there such a thing as life without adversity? No such thing. I mean, in the spiritual world, but even the spiritual, there's some sense of danger and the hardship or whatever, and so we call for Krishna. Krishna rescues again and again. And in this world, there's certainly adversity. So that strength beyond our strength, or being sufficiently favored by Balaram, is achieved by us simply through chanting. That connection with Krishna through the chanting of Krishna's holy name. And every one of us have been given that same opportunity. And some of us are better at it than others. Some of us are more consistent than others. And even in our own lives, some days we're better at it than others. That's the unsteady bhakti, but the potential is there for that connection. Notice in the middle that Krishna is on one side, that chanter is on the other side, and our founder Acharya is right there in the middle, making this nice connection with the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. And this is our next to the last slide. This is an image. Attaining this stage is called dhira. What does dhira mean? Dhira is Prabhupada's definition of dhira. Dhira means even when there's cause for disturbance, one remains undisturbed. Then elaboration is when there's no cause for disturbance and one remains undisturbed, that's not so wonderful. When there's cause for disturbance and one remains undisturbed, that's very wonderful. It's called dhira. So what's that dhira? That's this resiliency, that connection, spiritual connection and spiritual strength within is there, and so one is secure. Strength beyond our own strength, and we're safe, even when there's adversity. So it doesn't mean we become passive, we're active. And the connection is active, not passive. We're engaged in service, and along the path of our everyday life comes adversity. We've all experienced it. Young or old, there's adversity. And in between, there's adversity. Wait a while, there's adversity. And wait a while, when that one's gone, there's another 10. So it's just part of the territory in which we live. And it's quite okay, because when this stage of dhira is approached, we remain undisturbed even when there's cause. And so our process is devotional service, beginning with the chanting of the holy name. So we begin with the chanting of the holy name, What's required when chanting the holy name is attentiveness. I'll say it again. What's required when we're chanting the holy name is attentiveness to the name. So here's my attentiveness image. Think of this image when you get unattentive. Someone's watching you. Be vigilant like a hawk. Watch your attentiveness. And as much as you're attentive, then you'll experience that connection. And when you're experiencing that connection, the resiliency will be there. And that's our topic for this talk. Resilience in the face of reversals, or when facing adversity. Encountering adversity, what do? Take shelter. So make sure you take shelter before the adversity escalates. Now, I was invited to speak on topics that would be easy for newer people to understand, because topics that are newer people can understand, older people can also get reminders and get a refresh. But this topic was designed for newer people, so I hope you're okay with that. And see if there's some discussion. I see some people way over in the
Yes.
gallery. Teacher sheets. You can ask them questions too if you like. Or we'll invite you even if you don't wish to. You're invited. Okay, here comes question number 1.
Hare Krishna Gururaj. Maharaj, I was wondering, we always want to be resilient and elastic, and that's a good thing. But like we were discussing when we were in Gita Nagari, we don't want to become a punching bag. So how do we know where there's a boundary to like being resilient and elastic, but also not becoming so punching bag?
Well, it takes intelligence to discriminate between this and that. That's what intelligence does. And I just had a conversation today with somebody from another place, and they're undergoing some ordeal. And when a devotee is undergoing an ordeal, there's a way to take the ordeal without being a punching bag, and that starts with Bhaktisiddhanta's terminology. It starts with introspection. It starts with introspection, and that is, here comes some adversity. It must be. We read this on Thursday. This passage from Lord Brahma to Prithu. When arrangements come by providence, you don't complain. You don't whine and complain about the misfortune, because it's providential. Means there's something back there. I don't know what that something back there is, but some mishap, some error, some mistake, some improper use of free will. And now here comes something or someone as being the instrument for my past misdeeds, and I accept. Now, when you take that position of the introspection and reflection and acceptance, it doesn't mean you don't say anything or don't do anything. You have choices, and then you can start. Then you're in this. Same thing we discussed Thursday. You enter this reflective space where you take responsibility for your past actions, and here comes some of the fruits of my past actions, and that's just fine. And not only that, Krishna is being very kind because he's helping to uproot the very cause of my material existence, according to Bhaktisiddhanta's teaching. That's my own nescience and ignorance. So Krishna is being very kind. He's helping to uproot that. And sure enough, if I take shelter of Krishna, there's an impetus for me taking shelter of Krishna. Now, having gone through that reflective and introspective exercise, Now let me consider what might be appropriate for me to do in this circumstance. And then you do some brainstorming of options, and then you eliminate some, and then you select from the brainstorming session some that may be appropriate. Then you choose one or two. But how to avoid, your question was, how to avoid the circumstance of being a human punching bag. You have options of what choices you can make. But make sure you're not just in this retaliation, get back mentality. Oh yeah, I'll show you. And do that one. Don't do that one. Be in the mood of serving Krishna, and make sure you're in the mood of serving Krishna when you start making your choices. What's wise, given the circumstance? And then it depends on the circumstance, what choices you make, and how much intelligence you have, and how much dependent upon Krishna to give you that intelligence. And having some good, wise friends is also helpful, more than helpful. It's essential. Especially when adversity hits and it hits hard.
Maharaj, I had one about chanting. We know that Namabhas clears sin and increases attraction towards Shuddhanam. We also know that Namaparad really brings you down in your bhakti life. So I was wondering, does Namaparad also add up to your, upper of the karma, the karma that's coming, does it sort of add up to that?
No.
Okay.
There are two categories. So if I've understood your question correctly, make a distinction. You should, I should, we should make a distinction between karma and offense. They're not the same. The fruit that comes from karma, the fruit that comes from sin, the reaction to sin, the sinful reaction or karma, bad karma. And sin and offense and the reaction of sin and the reaction to offense are not the same. Sin is very quickly dissolved by the power of bhakti. Offense is far more stubborn, pernicious, hard to remove. Like a stain, it's hard to remove it. So, they're different. Sinning on the strength of chanting is different than simply sinning. Not like, okay, I'm going to stop chanting and I'll do some sinning and then it's okay. No, it's anyway. There's a distinction between sin and the consequence of sin, bad karma, and offense. And the consequence of offense is anarthas that are more difficult to remove. Both can be removed by the power of bhakti, but offense is more stubborn, more difficult to remove.
That was very clear, Maharaj. Thank you.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Manu. Please accept my humble obeisances. My question is related to the sadhana. How can I increase the consistency of my sadhana?
How to increase the consistency of your chanting?
Chanting and also my hearing,
And hearing and chanting.
reading.
Practice. Good association. Last time I was here in New Jersey, I heard that Jayadvaita Maharaj spent a good amount of time in New Jersey.
Yes.
And when he was asked, I was told that when he was asked this question, he just had one word answer. Sadhu Sangha. The answer to the how to question, Sadhu Sangha. And he would smile. The Jayadvaita Swami smile. You can unpack what does that mean. You can pull it out. And there's this strand of that. It's like, making a ghee whip. You can take cotton and pull the cotton apart, and it's got all these strands, and you put it back together, you put it in ghee and turn it, you got a ghee whip. But Sadhu Sangha is whether it's the strands or it's the ghee whip, it's Sadhu Sangha. So know what the parts are to Sadhu Sangha, and you do that. And do it, mindfully, do it carefully, do it purposefully. Like the discussion we had yesterday, one of them, don't just follow mindlessly without knowing the purpose. There's a purpose to Sadhu Sangha. It's serving the sadhu. In the service to sadhu, you get the mercy of the sadhu, the instructions of the sadhu, etc. You get the qualities of the sadhu by associating with sadhus. When your mood is right, when it's the mood of serving them.
So, Maharaj, when you say like sadhu sangha, so are you referring like it should be a daily association?
It should be what?
It should be a daily association with the sadhus, or like
Well,
once
it
in a
depends on where you live. Because sometimes people live up in nowhere, so.
in such case, how people like if
Just through recordings. And virtual, these days, it's virtual sangha. Right? And then there's abundance, then you have to select from the menu of so many virtual sangha opportunities. And then manage your time wisely. And, select the right persons that match, what your capacity is for receiving, and so forth. One really simple thing is one of these little devices. It's about this big, and it has a few thousand of Prabhupada recorded lectures.
Yes.
Sadhu Sangha in the palm of your hand.
Hare
You
Krishna.
can't go wrong. Sadhu Sangha with Prabhupada.
Anyone else have questions? You raise your hand. Give your mic. After this, Prabhu's kids, your kids class.
Anything online? Okay. Well,
Anything online?
nothing online. Fantastic. You're letting me off light today. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah. What's wrong?